Pasha for the presentation. And these presentations, like to me actually, especially, like give us a new and broader insight about inequality. Because in common sense, that when someone says about inequality, then usually think about the economic inequality. Like about the rich and poor, and also about the growth or other economic measurement of inequality. However, if when we try to look deeper about inequality, and then we can find various forms and types of inequality that might affect our life differently in different way in different things. For example, like Mas Zulfan and Atia shows that beside the vertical inequality, there are also like horizontal inequality that may affect many other things in our daily life, not only from the point of view of economics aspect, but also from the social aspect. And we need to think about how we can handle this problem of inequality, because it's quite difficult to develop mechanism to reduce, to lessen the negative effect of inequality, as Pak Asep shows in this presentation, that other aspect, like for example the early captures, makes the program or the interventions developed by the government become less effective, as when there is aspect related to the inequality. So I think this seminar, these presentations invite us to rethink about our understanding of inequality, about how we try to identify actually what kind of inequality that we have to handle, and then how we can develop policies in order to lessen the impact, negative impacts on our wealth, and also in other things, in other social aspects. And so now I would like to open the discussion session, and I will give opportunity to 3 people first to raise questions or comments on the presentations. And please mention your name and also your institution before you say about your question, please.
One of the conceptual frameworks that suggests associated with inequality level, especially with the borrowers. When I listen to these framings, I think participation will be one achieve something better in participation in terms of corruption. So maybe you could comment on that. And the second one, to establish the, I don't know how to say it, but I think it's like the dilemma of asking. If elite can pick and decide on who will be the members, but then last year is asking. There's a certain quality of the class here. So we can pick who people exist absolutely. And we provide a certain level of class. This will prefer something that's a little bit different to their class. So they might oppose the class that we propose to exist. Maybe you could comment on this. Just finished a survey on 2000 household. Please check out. It seems to say we don't take it. Very safe and much.
Second question is
Morning, my name is Iksan.
I'm sorry, but
Thank you. My name is Hakme Harun, retired from GIZ Social Protection Program. My first question to Ibu Atia, since you mentioned the initial education, have you ever mentioned in your study about the supply side ratings, not only the inequality based on the people affordability, but if supply side is not ready for initial education, and then this will be the most important issues for policy to be addressed by government. And to Pak Asep, if we look at the exclusion error of the BLP, I don't know if you have already addressed in your study about the conditional criteria. So the poor people is already a targeted beneficiary, but to get the benefit, they cannot fulfill the conditional criteria that caused by the other sector. For instance, they will get the cash transfer if they fulfill some health services for antenatal care, immunization, and so on. But if the supply side of the health services is not there, this is not their fault. So I just want to remind that we have to be neutral, because elite cultures is like very sensitive. We have to clearly exclude all technical aspects. Thank you.
My name is Iksan. Just two straight questions. The first one is actually, I try to basically reconcile the story of the story of recent experience. And first you say the targeting is good, and the targeting from your paper seems to be what? First, correlate with high inequality. Second, when the targeting seems to be one. Second, correlate with negative growth. Third, when the targeting seems to correlate with the number of poor being declining over time since 2011-2012. So I don't understand how the story is actually fitting with your story here, with like 2005-2012. You need better targeting that complete this argument with actual recent data of Indonesia, particularly what is actually the main cause of higher inequality in Indonesia. It doesn't have to be on this paper. Explanations of what actually the actual cause of inequality in Indonesia. There's several theories, and it's quite interesting. That's which hypothesis is actually the main argument that can be used in Indonesia. The third one is about this the paper from Pak Tajudin as well as Ibu Atianima is quite interesting. But about Pak Tajudin, I'm actually just wondering why you put the data from 2005 to 2012, even though like there were perhaps like a very interesting period between 1999 and 2004-2003, which you can see there's a lot of conflict. Not only normal conflict, but abnormal conflict. And when you skip these data periodizations, or you include these data periodizations, you're usually making a difference, totally difference. From if you're using cutoff 2005 to 2012, the story might be different. If you're using 1999 to 2012, I'm just wondering why. I mean, like, this is such an important point in Indonesia. Then you cut it off totally. And for the Asif and Asif Surihani, this is I'm just you really exclude the possibility of the benevolent elite in Indonesia. So this very purpose is capturing by elite is presume that elite doing the bad things by capturing. There's a several SMERU paper as well, which says that community distribution, not per se, is bad. That's my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Paisan. And now I would like to Mas Yupan again pass it to this one.
Okay, thank you for those questions. The first one is from Pak Soni. Yes, it will be very interesting to entertain the idea of the effect of extractive industry. But let's go back to the basic. The study is about scrutinizing the relationship between inequality and violent conflict as the inverse indicator of social stability. This is already a specified objective, and the literature is quite ambiguous in terms of the empirical evidence. So, if we want to entertain that idea, that would be too much in the current study. That can be a separate project, if you like. But if we go back to the period of during the democratic transitions, actually, I already have another study linking the oil-rich, oil gas-rich provinces in Indonesia, and linking that one with the secessionist conflict, and linking that one with the nature of regional inequality in Indonesia before the democratic transitions. So I've done that one in different papers, but not in this one. Of course, to entertain the idea of extractive industry, linking that one with rooting violence is something that can be done. So I think this will be another idea for the next project for me. I mean, since I've been doing research on conflict for the past couple of years. So if you ask me to comment on that one, how that kind of relationship will play if that one will be considered, I think one thing that we need to be clear here. We need to develop the framework first. Are we going to explain, to see the relationship between extractive industry or the extractive nature of the economy and violence? Or or you want to see the triangular relationship between violence, inequality, or extractiveness. So that could be a project, and I can. But what I can see is this can. We have to start with the framework first, okay, and then we find what kind of possible empirical strategy to support that kind of hypothesis. For me, this is an amazing idea to move forward for the next project. So I'll stop commenting on that. On the second one, why not the main period of unstable Indonesia during the democratic transitions? This is actually a kind of continuations of this project. This is continuations of my previous studies on conflict in Indonesia. My book on collective violence in Indonesia has just been published a few months ago by Palgrave, explaining collective violence in contemporary Indonesia, especially examining the 4 types of violence during the democratic transition. So the diagram that I showed you, the 3 diagram linking income and inequality, and then violence and income, and then violence and inequality, that kind of relationship has been found in the context of Java during the democratic transitions, in the context of brutal violence. Now what we did here, to check that kind of findings in the context of post-democratic transitions and post-decentralization in Indonesia, in the previously high conflict regions. Before, we only we have a very good data for routine violence only in Java, because we can see that during the democratic transition, we can see where was the secessionist violence, where were the ethnic violence, and where routine violence. So the pattern was, we know where separatist violence were, and we know where ethnic violence, and the most interesting finding for the category of collective violence during the democratic transitions was routine violence was predominantly in Java. But now what we can see is routine violence is becoming the norm of the whole Indonesia. We are away from the ethnic violence, we are away from routine secessionist violence, largely speaking, but now we are dealing with the more universal trend of routine violence, not only in Java, but also in the previously high conflict means referring to the ethnic kinds of violence. So this is a kind of shifting pattern. So when we can see the shifting pattern, so we need to cut. So I can argue for the argument for cutting the one. So the idea of 2005. So look what happened in 2005. More or less, the basic feature of decentralization in Indonesia has been achieved. The climax of decentralization in Indonesia is political decentralization through direct local elections of so that adds to the importance of 2005. So after all the dust of the turbulent period of decentralization reform and democratic transitions has passed, and now we see the different pattern of collective violence. Now let's scrutinize them. Of course, we can go back. But going back to the period before 2005, that will give different data too. And so the reasons can be both. One is technical, and the second one is social. So that's.
I have one question from why we choose initially education equality rather than supply side readiness of education. I think this is interesting comments as well as interesting insight for our maybe further research, because we try in this paper, in this study, we try to focus on initial inequality, either in income, expenditure inequality, and education, but we also control this inequality with the impact of inequality on urban growth, controlling for other variables based on population or economic development, as well as some village population, village and geographical related variables. But for supply side readiness variables, particularly on education, we haven't had any chance to explore it in this paper. So I cannot answer your question whether this supply side readiness is more important than initial education equality. But yeah, we have counter variables for mean years of schooling in the district levels. It shows a significant coefficient to the subsequent growth. So yes, education it's important for growth. I think that's all my comments for your question. Thank you.
Thank you for all the very good questions. This one from Pak Sony on participation. Thank you. That's for the very insightful suggestions. Yeah. We are reluctant to put as recommendations to improve participation. Why? Because one, empirically, we found in our studies, for example, looking at the PNPM, which is a program which tried to improve participations at the village level, we found that PNPM can only improve participation within the program itself. It fails to diffuse participations into the broader village life. There is no improvement in terms of participations at the village decision making, for example. Even though in the village there is a good participation mechanism of the program. And that's, we think, because participation is actually an endogenous variable. Participation doesn't come up exogenously from outside. People can participate only when they are more or less on equal basis. So when the inequality is already high in the beginning, we find it might be too difficult to improve participations by way of just introducing the concepts without actually improving the economic balance within the communities. I think that's our reason. But thanks for the suggestions. We will think more about that, whether there are other examples where participation can be improved without improving inequality itself. Yes. Secondly, your point about the quality of price is quite valid. But what we found that not hinders for the non-poor to receive rice from rice scheme because of two reasons. One, they can use the rice for other purposes. For example, to feed animals. To give, if they have chicken or if they have other animals, they keep the low quality ration rice to the animal. Secondly, and what is more prevalent now is that the ration rice actually is resold to the traders who will collect all the ration rice, and the traders will later resell the rice to the bulog. So it's become like a circular path between bulog the community, traders, bulog, computer striker. And the rice is circling behind this, among these agents. And over time, the quality of the rice becomes worse and worse. I think it will stop when the rice completely becomes black in color or something like that. For Pak Harun, thank you for the questions, Pak. But in BLT, they don't have conditions. Because BLT is the unconditional cash transfer. They have conditions in the PKH program, the conditional cash transfer. But I think in our other studies, even in PKH, actually the conditions don't really matter to the receiver of the benefits because it's basically just formality. They have the card, they have to take whether you go to the Posyandu or not, something like that. But even if you don't, you still get the money. I think that the mechanism has to be improved in order for your supply side constraint to matter to this. For Pak Isan Mojo, on your first comment, what I was trying to say is not that targeting is completely missed in Indonesia. If you look at these two diagrams between what's supposed to happen and what actually to happen, we see that there are still some targeting. Our point is that it can be better, or it should be better. It should not be as rather flat like that. It should be steeper like this. I think this is our point. So, no wonder we still have poverty reductions from social protection program, even though the targeting is not perfect. It still has some targeting, but it can be better, I think. Your second point about the cost of increasing inequality, you are exactly right. We didn't deal with that question. Why? Because we know that there are people who are studying that. In fact, there is an international organization who is now having a very large project trying to exactly answer this question. What is the reason behind increasing inequality in Indonesia? They have done the study for maybe almost 2 years, but I haven't seen any public seminar on the results. So we are still waiting also for them. We didn't want to deal with that question because we don't want to duplicate the work from others. Your third point is very interesting about the benevolent elite. I think if we want to interpret our findings in this concept, where we see that when inequality is higher, so the difference between the poor and the poor become clearer, the elite do try to accept more poor people into the program, that we can say benevolent. But they didn't kick out the non-poor who already received the benefit. So in this case, they are not benevolent. So maybe we can say that in Indonesia, the elite is half benevolent. Thank you. I think that's my answer.
Thank you very much, Pak Asep. And so we still have like about 20 minutes for this session. So I will open for like 3 more questions. 1, 2, okay, 3. Okay, so please mention your name and your institution.
Thank you very much. First, I'd like to thank the panel for a very enlightening set of presentations and very robust analysis. Very impressive. My first question, I think, is for Dia. I think others may comment on it as well. I wonder if horizontal, I think you're measuring horizontal inequality. I wonder how we might look at the concept of relative deprivation instead of measure education differences, ethnic groups. But Zulfan also mentioned that it appears that ethnic-based and religious-based inequality, or at least perceived inequality, of violence, associated with seems to be decreasing in Indonesia would suggest that horizontal inequality is sort of being redefined now. It's no longer based on those things. I wonder if we could use a different measure again. People's perception of power, politics, opportunities, they're being differentiated horizontally now based on those issues instead of education and things of that nature. I wondered if you might comment on that. For practical fun, I think it's kind of related. I'm curious to hear your perspectives on why wage or income inequality is not rising nearly as fast as expenditure inequality. I certainly did agree with you in the article in the Post that the way we measure by expenditures probably isn't the right way to go. But expenditures inequality has really jumped from 33 to 41, as you said, whereas income inequality has only jumped from 41 to 44. What are the implications of that? I think there should be tremendous implications on what you do about inequality. And for Asep, it seems to me, maybe I'm wrong, please correct me if I'm wrong, but the fact that your effects were stronger on the exclusion dimension suggests that there's more intentionality than just poor measurement of who's eligible. And I wondered if you had any thoughts. I know that you want to resist attempts to talk about causes, but I'm going to ask the question again anyway. Is this in part of the fact that the elites or the non-poor are still driving political processes, and therefore it's important to distribute some of these benefits to them? Do they have enough political power? And if that's the case, how does the recent change away from direct elections suggest what may happen going forward in terms of intentional or I should say exclusionary inequality? And then this goes back to the point that someone else asked. Well, if that's the case, maybe we do need to better understand inequality in that period before 2005, before the institutions of democracy really took firmer root. Because if we're going back to the days of indirect elections, we're going back to the days where